You're listening to Where You Live with Gene and Tony.
Welcome back to Where You Live with Gene and Tony. We had as our guest Paul Brownlee, who is the Director of Business Development for Reserve Advisors. We appreciate him being on the line. And I realize that for those of you that would like to get a hold of Paul to see what Reserve Advisors could do for your homeowners association putting together capital replacement study, please give them a call. The number 1-800-221-9882.
And I had a question for you during the break that I think is worth answering on the air. People are always asking if my mom just went through a condo purchase. She purchased a condo, and one of her concerns was, how do I know before I purchase that this condo has adequate reserves set aside for capital replacements? And I was thinking in the old days, a buyer gets a disclosure, but the legislation didn't require that a reserve study be included in that disclosure.
No, that's true. That was the way it was.
So how is a buyer to know if there's adequate reserves?
Well, number one, depending on where they are or the state, the state may or may not require that be a part of that disclosure packet that be given. But yes, every person looking at buying in a townhome or condominium should be asking if there has been a capital replacement study that has been completed on the property. And the most important thing to take a look at is there's going to be a lot of words, and boy, there's a lot of descriptions, and a lot of it is just kind of can be a boilerplate kind of thing that you can kind of get lost in numbers and figures. But there is something that talks about the cash flow schedule. It's the bottom line. It's saying
of the reserve study.
Yeah, for example, it says if we need $240,000 for roofs, and roofs need to be replaced in another 10 years. Okay, and there is, let's say, a 20-year lifespan. That means we've gone through half that. The reserves ought to have at least $120,000 just for the roofs at this point.
Sure.
Because you only have 10 more years to go.
Sure.
And so you take a look at all of those components and those line items that need to be done, and you come up with the percentage of funding for the capital replacement of all those items.
So if I'm buying a condo, I'm going to look at the reserve study and say, okay, it's 2011. Here's how much they should have saved in this homeowners association, $120,000. Then I look at the budget and see how much they've actually saved.
Yes.
And see if it matches or how close is it.
Yes, and there are a number of associations that are 100% funded with what they need. And those are great associations to be a part of.
That's true. So I can request the reserve study when I buy?
Yes, and that's something that people should do to take a look at. And, it can be kind of misleading because, FHA over the last few years has stated that they say that if we're going to give a loan to someone, an FHA loan for purchase of a unit in an association, they want to see that the association setting aside 10% of whatever their yearly budget is.
So whatever they collect in a year, the FHA is saying 10% of that has to be set aside in a long-term savings for capital
for reserves. Okay. And I don't think that is necessarily the way to look at it, because I know of one association, because they have been fully funded, they only need to put in 7% of their budget every year to continue to be fully funded. So by that token, and I'm just waiting for that to happen right now.
Someone to get turned down.
FHA is going to say,
because it's only 7% being set aside.
You're not putting in 10%, and to me that is just that is the bureaucratic kind of stuff you probably expect.
And that's probably why Minnesota came up with the word adequate reserves instead of naming a number or naming a percentage. That legislation can't help but be a little bit vague, I guess.
Well, we'd love to hear from you today, folks. Give us a call, 651-289-4488. We talked about earlier topic I think we can kind of get back to here. And this is with the state of Connecticut. There's a legislator who said, I've got the answer to resolving most of all disputes between owners in condominiums and their homeowners association. What is that answer? We'll tell you after we take this break, right here on Where You Live with Gene and Tony on AM 1280, The Patriot.